Hey guys, tonight we're leaving behind all modern comforts. No Wi-Fi, no coffee, and no heated blankets, and stepping into a world where your alarm clock is a rooster and your pillow might be a turnip. Welcome to the humble, hay-ented life of a medieval peasant. If you've ever complained about slow internet or soggy fries, let me just say, you wouldn't last a day here. Seriously, you'd be down before lunch somewhere between cold porridge and sharing a straw bed with 3 cousins and a goat. So before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from in the comments and what time it is. I love seeing this little community from all around the world. Now please turn off the lights, let the fan hum in the background, and let's begin tonight's journey. Imagine this. You don't wake up to the soft chime of your smartphone, but to someone outside yelling about a missing chicken again. You live in a tiny and forgotten village that even maps have given up trying to label it. It sits in a crooked forest bend that looks like someone sneezed while drawing. The trees loom like judgmental grandmothers, and the dirt road into town has seen more wagon ruts than repairs. Your house, lovingly crafted from sticks, mud, and hope. The technical term is waddle and daub, which sounds like a medieval tavern snack, but is the most desperate form of wall construction. The thatched roof leaks in 5 artistic places, each selected by the gods of rain for maximum annoyance. It's cozy, like a damp sock is cozy. You share this house with everyone. Parents, siblings, maybe an aunt, definitely livestock. There's a hen that sleeps on your head when it gets cold. Privacy isn't a concept. It's a luxury reserved for nobles. The smell, it's bold. A stunning blend of smoke, sheep, damp wood, and something suspicious coming from the corner. But you're used to it. You don't even flinch when someone lights the hearth. And the smoke decides it's staying indoors. Your bed is a pile of straw that squeaks every time you breathe. No pillow, but you've mastered sleeping with your arm under your head and one eye open for spiders. The nearby forest isn't for exploring, it's for avoiding. Stories pour out of those woods. Wolves, witches, and one guy who went in looking for mushrooms and came out convinced he was a duck. You stay close to home, not out of fear, but because walking a mile in shoes made of sheep guts isn't worth it. Time is measured by the sun or how loudly your joints pop. Church bells from the next village might drift over on the wind, but mostly you guess. If your back hurts and you're hungry, it's time to eat or at least chew something edible-ish. You don't know your age, no one does. Age is measured in harvests, not candles. Do you remember when old Marjorie got struck by lightning and survived? That was at least 4 winters ago, maybe 5. She's fine now. He points at clouds and mutters. And yes, you've heard of cities, vast places with stone buildings and people who bathe for fun. But that's like hearing about dragons. Fascinating, wildly unrealistic. You've never seen a city. Probably never will. You wouldn't know what to do there anyway. Nobody wants to hear your theories on turn-up storage or let your chicken sit at the table. But with all the mud, mess, and mild chaos, this place is yours. You know the trees. You know who makes the best stew. Hint, not your mom, but don't say it out loud. You know precisely which roofs to avoid when it rains. And that kind of knowledge, deep bone-level familiarity, is a comfort all its own. The outside world may be full of kings, knights, and drama. But in your tiny village, survival is the story. One muddy, smoky, chicken-filled day at a time. You wake up with hay in your mouth, a goat chewing your sleeve, and the burning stench of something on fire. Maybe it's your dignity. Welcome to another glorious morning as a medieval peasant, where the rooster doesn't just crow. It screams like it's been personally wronged, and your body feels like it lost a tavern brawl with a sack of bricks. There's no snooze button, just your mother shouting from the doorway, "Get up!" The pig ate your clothes again. You open your eyes to a smoky ceiling, a damp patch crawling down the wall, and your cousin drooling peacefully beside you, the luxury suite, medieval edition, and you'd better hurry. The early bird gets the warm turn-up. The late bird gets yelled at and assigned latrine trench duty again. Now breakfast. Oh, sweet summer child. Forget eggs, fruit, or anything that goes with a latte. You're having yesterday's mashed barley porridge scraped from the bottom of the pot with the same spoon your grandfather once used to fend off a wolf. It's warm, textured like wet gravel, and technically counts as food. There's bread if you're lucky. Dark, dense, and capable of blunting an axe. You chew it like you're negotiating a treaty. Today's task list endless. Feed the animals, chop wood, fetch water from a well that might be haunted, tend the cabbages, chase the escape artist goose, help mend the neighbor's fence, and try to stop old Margery from fighting the steward again. She thinks he's a warlock. We're not saying she's wrong. You ache before breakfast. You'll hobble into lunch, and by sundown, you'll develop a new spinal that sounds like someone opening a haunted door. And here's the best part. No matter how much you do, there's always more. Always. Your tools are mostly sticks, stones, or things that used to be tools before time, and rust stepped in. The rake has one tooth. The shovel is more of a suggestion. Your wheelbarrow squeals like a dying goose and pulls hard to the left. That's fine. You lean to the right. Balance. Ah, yes. Your clothes. Picture a burlap sack that lost a fight with a fence. Add 5 patches, hopeful stitching, and a belt doubling as an emergency chicken leash. Style, number function, barely, but it keeps things covered enough that people don't scream when you walk past. And yet, somehow everyone around you acts like this is normal, because it is. This is the grind, the quiet, grimy, mud-caked exhaustion of medieval life. And you can't escape it because there's no such thing as a day off when firewood doesn't chop itself and the sheep are already plotting their breakout. Still, there's a strange pride in it. You may be covered in soot and mysterious bruises, but you can patch a thatch roof with one hand and stop a chicken brawl with the other. You don't need gold. You have calluses and an emotional bond with your home. Historians still debate whether peasants were just cogs in the feudal machine or silent heroes who kept the medieval mess from falling apart. Honestly, you don't have time to argue. You're too busy chasing a pig that's stolen your last clean sock. But here's the secret no one tells you. There's a rhythm to it. It's rough poetry in the routine. You know when the barley is ripe just by the way it leans. You can smell rain in the wind. You've memorized the cries of every animal in the village and which ones are lying. You don't own much, but you know this world. And that kind of knowledge, it's powerful. So you work, you sweat, you mutter curses under your breath in case the priest is nearby. And you keep going because someone has to. You have arms and knees that still function. No one writes stories about you, but without you, the stories wouldn't happen. Your home as well. Let's generously call it rustic. Imagine a loaf of bread left out in the rain, then lived in by 4 generations of one family and 2 animals pretending to pay rent. That's your house. It leans to one side like it's had too much ale and groans in the wind, like it's actively rethinking its life choices. The walls are made of wattle and daub, which is medieval code for sticks, mud, and anything else you could slap together before the sheep tried to eat it. The mud was once fresh 3 winters ago. Now it's held together by straw, spidery webs, and your grandmother's unwavering belief that it'll last 1 more year. The roof is thatched. It leaks. Not everywhere, just in 5 strategically randomized spots chosen by fate to drip directly onto your head, your bedding, and the corner where your dry firewood tries to live in peace. You've patched it with moss, more straw, and at one point an old hat. The hat leaks too. There's a window, but don't get excited. It's not glass. Depending on the season and your budget, it's a hole covered with oil-soaked linen or a sad pig's bladder. In summer, it lets in air and hope. In winter, it lets in everything else. Wind, cold, and occasionally a curious bird just having a look around. The floor is dirt. You try to pretend it's a feature. It's not. It's just dirt. You sweep it with a broom of tied sticks, which mostly rearranges the filth into decorative little piles. Occasionally, something sprouts. You ask no questions. Furniture is minimal and deeply suspicious. A 3-legged stool inherited from a late uncle who once lost a thumb to a suspicious fish. A wooden table carved so deeply it may be a diary. and a chest where you store clothes, tools, and occasionally yourself when life is too much. Your bed is a sack of straw. It cacks. It smells like medieval dreams, sweat, damp wool, and the ghost of last week's leek stew. Of course, you share it. Privacy is not a concept here. You sleep next to family, pets, and possibly a ghost who likes warmth. At night, the room is pitch black, not cozy dark, just void. You can't see your hand, but hear your uncle snoring like a foghorn running in despair. Candlelight is precious, rationed like it was made from unicorn tears. Firelight from the hearth is better, except when the chimney reverses and fills the room with smoke like an angry ghost. There's no bathroom. It's just a bucket or a bush or a short walk if you're adventurous and don't mind bumping into a neighbor doing the same. It's not glamorous. It's not sanitary, but it's yours. And don't forget the residents. Rats, beetles, and a chicken that has claimed the windowsill as its throne. It watches you eat, judges you. I may be plotting something. You try not to think about it. Still, with all its quirks, and by quirks, we mean structural hazards. It's home. You know every creaky board, every drafty gust, every spot on the wall where your dad once said, "We'll fix that come spring." 8 springs ago. You don't love the house, but you trust it. It hasn't fallen yet, and by medieval standards, that makes it a palace. Historians debate whether peasants felt pride in their homes or endured them. But when you sit near the fire holding a bowl of soup thicker with onions than broth, and the wind howls like a cursed musician outside, you're just glad to be indoors and not soaking wet. Tea, that's happiness. So you tuck your feet under a scratchy wool blanket, feel the warmth of a dog curled beside you, and listen to the soft crackle of the hearth. The roof may leak, the floor may shift, and something might be squeaking under the table, but it's warm, it's yours, and you make it through another day. And in this life, that's all you need. You wake up already tired, not metaphorically, tired. Your back aches, your knees crack like medieval percussion instruments. Your dreams, such as they are, mostly involve chasing a goat that turns out to be the tax collector again. The sun hasn't risen, but someone outside is already yelling about sheep. Of course they are. You sit up, brush a beetle off your blanket, and crack your neck in 3 places. A nearby chicken looks at you disapprovingly. You don't know why it slept on your pillow. Your morning routine is not gentle. No yoga, no journaling, no artisan coffee. Just the cold slap of reality, a splash of water from a musty-smelling wooden bucket, last week's turnip, and the quiet resignation of yet another very long day. First, you light the fire carefully. The last time you got it wrong, it blew ash into your eyes and smoked the entire hut. Your mother still insists she saw a demon in the smoke. You insist it was just Uncle Bert snoring with his mouth open. Then you check the coals. You must borrow fire from the neighbors if they've gone out overnight. This involves carrying a flaming stick across a muddy yard while trying not to ignite your only tunic or get attacked by the goose that guards its territory like a dragon. Fire is communal. Next, chores. There are so many chores. Infinite replicating endlessly mundane chores. You check the chickens. One is missing again. You suspect she's joined the miller's hens and is now living a better life. You sigh and move on. Water must be fetched. This involves walking to a well uphill and suspiciously far away from a supposedly compact village. You carry 2 buckets on a yoke over your shoulders. When you return, your arms feel like boiled noodles, and your shirt fuses to your skin in places you didn't know could fuse. Breakfast, it's more like edible encouragement. Cold stew reheated on glowing embers, seasoned with a pinch of salt and the sound of your stomach protesting. You eat, standing up, staring at the wall, pondering life's meaning and whether your neighbor stole your good spoon. Then it's off to the fields. The ground is rough, half frozen, and only grudgingly accepts your home. You dig, you plant, you sweat. You listen to birds mocking you with their freedom and complete lack of tax obligations. There is no concept of done. The moment one task ends, another begins. Fix the fence, chase the pigs, turn the compost, haul wood, scare off the fox that's getting too bold. You once caught it. eyeing your chickens like it was planning a wedding. And all of this happens before noon. Your muscles no longer complain. They gave up several seasons ago. Your hands are rougher than your old boots. Your feet, well, they exist. Barely. You stub your toe on something that might be a rock or a leftover Viking. Still, you keep moving because if you stop, everything collapses. The sheep wander, the pot burns, the roof leaks faster. There are no buffers in peasant life. Everything runs on thin margins, communal effort, and the desperate hope that winter won't arrive early. Your neighbors are dancing the same weary dance. You see them in the fields, hunched like question marks, swatting flies, and occasionally swatting each other. There's comfort in the shared struggle. 3 people show up with rope, and if someone breaks a fabulous shrug, if someone gets hurt, they're given soup, herbs, and 5 contradictory opinions about which saint is to blame. Historians still argue whether this endless labor was oppression or simply the rhythm of a world without machines. You don't have time to discuss. You're trying to uproot something stubborn that might be a sleeping hedgehog. Eventually the sun shifts, shadows lengthen. Your breath smells like onions and regret. You limp home, boots squeaking, tunic stained, your face patterned with a perfect sunburn rectangle from leaning too long in one direction. But there's satisfaction too. You worked, you fed the animals, you kept the fire burning, you scared the fox again, and when your head finally hits that slightly damp straw pillow, the last thought you have before sleep takes you is you'll do it all again tomorrow. Because that's what survival looks like here. Not glorious, not noble, but stubborn and steady. One ache, one chore, one day at a time. You sit on a wooden stool that wobbles like it has performance anxiety. Before you are a bowl of pottage, which is, well, it's pottage. A kind of eternal stew made from whatever was left from yesterday and the day before. And if we're honest, probably Tuesday. It's a sludgy mix of barley, leeks, a root vegetable with identity issues, and a surprise bean. There's always one. It's been simmering in the same pot for days. New ingredients are added, nothing is ever removed. The result is not so much a dish as a lifestyle. It smells faintly of onions, heavily of smoke, and somewhat aggressively of please don't ask. You eat it with a spoon you carved from a tree that once insulted you. It's not symmetrical, but it works. Sometimes, other times, you drink the pottage like a lumpy soup and try not to think about texture. Texture is the enemy. If you're lucky, you get bread. It's dark, complex, and capable of surviving plagues and minor explosions. The outside is crusty. The inside is also crusty. You dunk it in the pottage because chewing it raw is how you break teeth. Fun fact, medieval teeth were famously terrible. One historian even found murs worn smooth by years of chewing on grit-filled bread thanks to poorly cleaned grinding stones. So yes, breakfast might hurt you while you are being fed. On special days, there might be a bit of cheese. It smells like ambition and old socks, but it's the closest thing you'll get to joy before lunchtime. On very special days, someone finds a dried apple. It's sliced into 7 pieces, and everyone gets to lick theirs. Drink ale, warm, cloudy, thick enough to chew. It's not beer. Not really. It's more like liquid bread with a side of potential regret. But it's safer than water, which is teeming with invisible bacteria you've never heard of and will never live long enough to name. Everyone drinks ale, including children, because no one wants to explain chalera to a 6-year-old. The ale has floaties. You pretend not to notice. Sometimes it fizzes, sometimes it growls. You don't ask questions. You eat in silence or grunted conversation. Rain coming, someone says. Saw a frog near the well, says another. These are the headlines of your morning. The daily newspaper is delivered by superstition and animal behavior. And if someone's missing from breakfast, you all quietly agree not to ask. Either they're sick or they're avoiding the stew. Possibly both. Historians still argue whether peasant diets were nutritionally adequate or cleverly disguised malnutrition. One thing's for sure, there was a lot of it. Not variety, but volume. You ate a lot of the same thing over and over until it became part of your soul or the digestive system, or both. There's a grim comfort in this meal. You know what you're getting. You know how it tastes. You know it won't surprise you unless you bite into a small stone again. That's happened before. Your jaw still remembers. The fire crackles. The air is thick with the smell of damp wool and boiled turnips. A fly circles your head and then lands in someone's bowl. No one blinks. It's a protein bonus, probably. And when you're done, you wipe your hands on your tunic. It already had pottage stains. What's one more? You sigh, stand up and stretch until something pops alarmingly in your lower back. Breakfast is over. Fuel's in the tank. It's time to face the world. Mud, chores, and that one duck who has it out for you. Because in medieval times, even breakfast was a survival exercise. You step outside and the mud greets you like an old friend. My. Enthusiastic, clinging, and everywhere. It's not just on the ground. It's on your boots, hem, face, and somehow already in your mouth. Welcome to your day. Work begins not with a clock, but with the sun squinting through clouds and a rooster with absolutely no volume control concept. You stretch, hear 3 distinct cracks in your spine, and get moving because no one else is going to haul that water, chop that wood, or convince the goat to stop eating the laundry. Your first stop, the field, or more accurately, a patch of reluctant earth that's been farmed so hard it started sighing whenever you show up. You grab your hoe, well-worn, handle splintered, blade slightly bent from an argument with a rock, and start digging. The soil isn't soft. It's not even pretending to be. It's clumped, stubborn, and full of things that shouldn't be there. Chunks of bone, last year's forgotten turnips, and a fork someone lost in 1322. But you dig anyway, because without planting, there's no harvest. And without harvest, you get the culinary joy of boiled moss. Farming is backbreaking, slow, and repetitive. It is a form of psychological warfare. Plow, plant, weed, repeat. If you're lucky, the weather will cooperate. If you're fortunate, the birds won't eat everything before it sprouts. And if you're lucky, miraculously, the steward won't show up halfway through and ask, "How's your yield looking this year?" Like you're growing gold nuggets. You take breaks when you can, which is to say, you stop moving briefly and lean on your hoe until your legs remember they're attached to your body. Lunch isn't so much a meal as it is a moment. A bite of bread, a gulp of ale, a chance to sit down until your knees mutiny. Then it's off to chop firewood. Your axe has a personality, mostly stubborn. It gets stuck in knots, bites into bark enthusiastically, and occasionally decides it's a hammer. You swing, sweat, curse under your breath quietly. Your mum's nearby and try not to drop the log on your foot. Again, next water again. You haul it from the well, balancing sloshing buckets on a yoke that cuts into your shoulders like it's got a grudge. The walk back is a wobbly, awkward dance of don't spill it, don't trip, don't let the pig knock you over. And speaking of pigs, they're everywhere. Medieval pigs are not cute. They're hairy, clever, and slightly evil. One stares at you with the eyes of someone who's plotting. He probably is. You don't turn your back on him anymore. By mid-afternoon, you've been on your feet so long, you're starting to forget what sitting feels like. Your hands are raw. Your shirt is soaked. You've got a leaf stuck to your cheek and no idea how it got there. Still, you push on because the firewood won't stack itself. The coop needs patching. Someone has to find out what that terrible smell is behind the granary. Spoiler, it's probably a dead rat or old Bert's forgotten cheese experiment. Historians still argue whether the medieval workday was sun-up to sundown or broken up by prolonged rests. The truth, you rest only when the job's done or when your body politely collapses. But oddly enough, the work does bring something with it. A rhythm, a strange muscle-burning satisfaction. You can point to things and say, "I did that." The field was tilled. The roof was patched. The sheep are no longer tangled in the fence. Victory. And when the sun finally dips and the sky starts bruising into purple, you drag your aching body back home. Every joint is sore. Your fingernails are suspiciously black. Your legs feel like boiled roots. But there's a fire waiting, maybe even a stew. Your mother nods at you. Your brother grunts. Your sister hands you a crust of bread. You sit sore and exhausted and realize you did it. You survived another day, and tomorrow you'll do it all again. Hunger is a familiar companion out here, not the gentle, "oh, I skipped lunch" sort of hunger. No, this is the "I just dreamed about eating my own shoes and was almost convinced" kind. The kind where a single crumb of bread can spark a full-blown family negotiation. One where Uncle Bert suddenly remembers he's a lawyer. Food in your world isn't just nourishment, it's an aspiration. It's fantasy. It's the stuff of bedtime stories and mild hallucinations. You don't eat because it's mealtime, you eat because you might mistake your hat for a biscuit if you don't. Let's start with the hero of every meal, pottage. It's not soup, it's not stew, it's pottage. A culinary shrug, the dish that dares to ask, what happens if we keep adding stuff forever? It's been simmering for days, weeks maybe, topped off daily with whatever you didn't trip over on the way to the door. Leeks, oats, wild onions, 2 suspicious roots, and a bean. There's always one bean. It stares at you, texture untrustworthy, color ambiguous. Flavor, a mystery wrapped in an enigma, seasoned with ash. You eat it anyway because chewing is better than weeping. On better days you get bread. Better is highly relative. It's dark, it's dense. It could double as a building material. You once dropped it and it bounced. It's made from rye, barley, or whatever, didn't get eaten by rats. Often the flour is full of grit, actual rock dust, because your millstone's been through a lot, and so have your teeth. And yet, you dunk it in your pottage, pretending it's croutons, while simultaneously wondering if your mirrors just made a break for it. Now famine. Famine is a whole different beast. Things get grim when the weather forgets how seasons work, or the crops decide to take a personal day. The pottage turns creative. You start tossing in acorns after soaking them for 3 days to avoid bitterness and, death. You grind up ferns. You eye the dandelions like they owe you money. Tree bark enters the chat. There's a famine bread made of ground roots and bark that tastes like betrayal and has the chewiness of medieval regret. You bake it over an open flame and pray your teeth forgive you. Still hungry? Congratulations. It's time to invent cuisine. Weeds are now a vegetable. Moss is a garnish. And if you find a turnip, you throw a feast. A turnip. It's a root so bland it once got kicked out of a salad. And yet in this world, it's a star. Sometimes you get desperate. People boil shoe leather. You once saw your cousin try to make broth out of a belt. It didn't work. But he insists it had umami. You don't even know what that means. But then, the miracle. Feast days arrive. Sweet, glorious church-mandated excuses to eat. The village puts on their least milded tunics. Music starts, someone's cousin misplays the bagpipes, and food appears like magic. Actual meat. Goose, pig, or something that might have once quacked. Honey cakes, apples baked in ash, cheese that smells like old shoes but tastes like joy. It's glorious. For one night, you eat like a king, and then it's back to the grind, the stew pot, and the daily pottage lottery. You open the lid, you see something new. You don't ask, you stir, you serve, you chew, you survive. Historians still debate whether peasant diets were tragically limited or quietly nutritious. All you know is you've eaten the same soup for 7 days straight, and it's beginning to develop a personality. But the truth is, food is community. You don't starve alone. When things go wrong, the village rallies. Someone brings a bit of flour. Someone else shares salt. An old lady hands you half a dried plum like she's giving you the crown jewels. You trade eggs for herbs. You stretch every crumb, and somehow no one goes completely without. Because out here, survival isn't heroic. It's cooperative. So you keep eating. You chew that bread like it owes you money. You raise your spoon to the gods of stew. You swallow something leafy that might have been a sock in a past life. And you smile, sort of, because you're still here, still fed, still upright. And in the world of medieval peasants, that's called a win. Let's talk about what's really in your dinner. Besides dreams, desperation, and a chunk of bark that no one admits putting there. Food in medieval peasant life comes with generous help and bonus content. It's not just that the ingredients are humble, it's that they come straight from the ground, the stream, or the goat, and never really stop being part of those environments. First of all, cleanliness. or as it's known in your household, that thing we talk about but don't always do. The vegetables are pulled from the dirt, given a brisk shake and tossed into the stew. Washing them with what water? That's drinking water. Dirt builds character. So do bugs. You bite into a carrot and it crunches. Not just because it's undercooked, but because there's still a pebble clinging to it, like a particularly affectionate parasite. You don't even flinch anymore. You spit it discreetly into your sleeve and keep chewing. Let's not forget the prep station, the communal wooden table. It's warped, stained, and engraved with generations of family graffiti and knife slips. It's been used to gut fish, shell peas, pluck chickens, and deliver a baby on one memorable occasion. We don't talk about that soup. Cutlery optional. You might have a spoon, or you share a spoon. Or you can use bread as both utensils and napkins. Plates are mostly trenchers. Stale slabs of old bread used as edible dishes. Sometimes you eat the trencher. Sometimes the trencher eats you back. And the hands. Oh, the hands. You've been farming, hauling, scraping, digging, and now you're cooking bare-handed because gloves haven't been invented for peasants yet. You stir the pot with fingers that still smell faintly of sheep. But it's fine. You've built up an immunity to everything except irony. And to make things more exciting, let's throw in some lovely medieval pests. There's always a fly. There's sometimes a beetle. You once found a frog in the butter. It blinked at you. You gave it a name. The butter was returned to the shelf. Now, about the kitchen, huh? No such thing. Cooking happens over the hearth, a smoky, temperamental pit in the center of the hut that sometimes functions as a fireplace and sometimes as a smoke grenade. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that politely funnels the smoke directly into your lungs. Everything smells like ash. Everything tastes like ash. Your stew could contain 7 different herbs, a boiled egg, and half a chicken, and you'd still only taste burnt. And the firewood, green, wet, or moldy, is your only fuel. It hisses, it sputters, it goes out mid-boil. You once spent 2 hours trying to light it with a spark in a prayer, while your grandmother yelled advice that contradicted itself every 10 seconds. Still, somehow meals get made, and despite the odds, they're edible. Mostly you eat them because you're starving. You eat them because food is food. You eat them while avoiding the smoke with one hand and holding the stew pot steady with the other. Historians still argue whether peasant meals were nutritious or just desperate. But one thing's clear, they were resourceful. You used every part of everything. Bones for broth, beet greens for stew, stale ale for cooking. Even crushed snail shells have a weird crunchy spice. You didn't mean to include them, it just happened. And honestly, sometimes it's good. Good, a perfect onion, a loaf of fresh bread. It's a lucky piece of meat that isn't entirely gristle. You savor it slowly, like a noble with a silver fork and no chores. You might even smile just a little before someone shouts, "The goat's in the garden again." You must abandon your bowl mid-bite. It may not be clean because that's dinner in your world. Part meal, part gamble, part sport. It may not be pretty, but it keeps you alive. And the beetle, you named him Gerald. He lives here now. You may think you know what it means to be clean. A hot shower, some soap that smells like lavender fields, a little scrub with a loofah while soft music plays. Adorable. Now forget all of that. In your world, bath day is less of a routine and more of a rare event you mentally prepare for, like a medieval pilgrimage. Hygiene exists, but only just. And it is not glamorous. First of all, there's the bathtub, or rather the tub-shaped wooden barrel that looks like it used to store pickles, and probably still does. It's wide enough for exactly 1.5 people, which is unfortunate because the entire household shares it. Same water, same soap. It's the same prolonged, uncomfortable eye contact. You're not first in the tub. That honor goes to your father, who's been working in the fields all day and smells like freshly sweated despair. By the time it's your turn, the water has gone from hot to room temperature to mildly threatening. It's less a bath and more a tea of everyone's collective regrets. Soap? Yes, sort of. It's a lump of homemade lye soap that burns like betrayal and smells like something died inside a pine tree. It doesn't lather. It doesn't soothe. It just removes. Removes dirt, removes skin, and removes your will to continue. You scrub as best you can, then rinse with a jug of water that's only mostly cold. There's no towel, just a vaguely dry cloth everyone calls the good rag. It's not good. It's just the one that smells least like a goat. Hair washing is a whole production. You bend over while someone dumps rainwater on your head and massages in a mixture of ash, nettles, and what they claim is herb paste. You suspect it's just moss. Either way, your scalp tingles for 3 days, and you come out smelling like a damp hedge. Bath day isn't weekly. It's not even monthly, depending on the season. In winter, you might go months without a complete wash. You get spot cleaned, hands, face, maybe your armpits if you're feeling fancy. The rest, you let it age naturally because, let's be honest, bathing is a logistical nightmare. First, you have to heat the water. That means hauling it from the well, building a fire, waiting for it to boil, and not getting distracted by the pig trying to eat your boots. Then, you need privacy, which means yelling, "I'm bathing," and hoping no one opens the door. And when you're done, the floor's wet, the fire's out, and you're shivering in a drafty room, hoping the neighbor's goat hasn't stolen your clothes again. There's also the question of frequency. You bathe for special occasions, feast days, weddings, the rare visit from someone vaguely important. But most days, you do what everyone else does. Live with it. Mask the smell with herbs. Pretend it's not that bad. I hope the other person smells worse. Historians still debate just how stinky medieval peasants were. Some argue they used natural herbs and river bathing enough to stay reasonably clean. Others believe you could smell a village before you saw it. Based on your current reality, it's both. And yet somehow you adapt. You get used to the grime, the itch, the faint aroma of damp wool and regret. Your nose stops noticing. Your friends stop mentioning it. You all carry an invisible agreement. Don't ask, sniff, or judge. But on those rare sacred days when the water is warm, the air is still, and you've got the tub all to yourself, you soak, you exhale, you float momentarily in peace, pretending you live in a castle, wear silk, and bathe with rose petals. Then the door cracks open and someone yells, "Are you done yet?" "I'm next." And the dream ends. You leave the tub, your skin red and your soul slightly cleaner. You feel 10 pounds lighter, smell at least 12% less offensive, and for a moment you almost believe in miracles. Then the goat eats your towel. Winter in the medieval village isn't just a season, it's a siege. A 4-month-long boss battle waged by snow, wind, and your drafty roof. You don't prepare for it so much as a brace, like someone locking eyes with an oncoming ox cart and whispering, "Well, here we go." It starts with a chill in the air and ends with you sleeping in your boots under 3 layers of scratchy wool and 1 disgruntled chicken. The sun becomes more of a rumor than a source of heat. And every time you open the door, the wind slaps you like you owe it money. Fire becomes your god. You worship it daily. You build it, feed it, beg it not to go out. Your heart is the beating heart of the household. If it dies, you all turn into turnip-flavored popsicles. But keeping it alive isn't easy. Firewood is limited, damp, and aggressively reluctant to burn. You spend half your day hauling logs, and the other half staring at coals like they insulted your mother. The cold finds you anyway. It creeps through cracks in the dew walls, slithers under the door, and coils around your ankles with the persistence of an unpaid debt. You wear everything you own all at once. Tunics, cloaks, furs, socks, layered like a terrified onion, and still your nose remains an icicle. And that's just inside the house. Outside it's worse. The mud turns to brittle earth, then to ice. The animals are grumpy, the chickens refuse to lay, and your breath is like tiny ghost complaints. You try to do chores with mittens made of stitched-up old rags, but drop the bucket every 3rd step because your fingers have unionized and are threatening to strike. Food, You're down to root vegetables and dried regret. The stew is mostly turn-up. The bread is harder than emotional trauma. Occasionally, someone adds old pickled herring for flavor, which is a lie. That's not flavor, that's punishment. Depending on how generous the chicken feels, You spend your evenings huddled near the fire with your family, neighbors, and possibly your livestock. It's crowded, it's sweaty, it's a symphony of coughs, creaking joints, and the occasional fart someone blames on the dog. Sleep happens under a mound of shared blankets and strategically placed siblings. You spoon whoever's warmest. There are no rules, only warmth. If someone rolls over and steals the blanket, they get yelled at, smacked with a spoon, and possibly pelted with cold potatoes. And the sounds. Oh, the winter sounds. The roof cacks like it's auditioning for a horror story. The wind howls through the cracks in the walls, sometimes forming words like moo or you. You're unsure if it's the wind or your neighbor yelling through the chimney. Bathing? Not a chance. You're lucky if you wash your face with snow. Hygiene becomes a fond memory from autumn. You sometimes forget what your knees look like under all those layers. Historians still argue whether winter was truly a time of rest for peasants or a slower kind of suffering. Sure, you're not planting or harvesting, but you're still alive, cold, and swearing at the fire like it understands English. And yet, in all this frozen misery, there are moments of warmth, moments of laughter. Someone tells a ridiculous story about a goat who stole a priest's hat. Someone brings out a hidden stash of dried apples. Someone starts singing terribly, and everyone joins in because it feels less like survival and more like life. You find joy in small things. A good flame, a warm bowl, a chicken that finally lays one blessed egg. You survive by sharing everything. Space, food, blankets, complaints. You become a walking patchwork quilt of patience, hope, and practical layering techniques. Because winter is merciless, but you're more stubborn than frostbite. So you wake up each day, crack the ice from your boots, stoke the fire, and whisper to yourself, "We're halfway through, probably. Maybe." Then you pull your cloak tighter, shove another log on the flames, and keep going. Because that's what peasants do best. There are blankets, and then there's Bertha, the family cow. She's large, warm, occasionally gassy, and undoubtedly your home's most reliable nighttime heat source. You don't just sleep near her, you sleep with her voluntarily, gratefully. Because when the frost bites, the fire dies, and your uncle won't stop hogging the only half-decent wool blanket. Bertha is a four-legged radiator with a tail and a tendency to moo in her sleep. Welcome to medieval winter survival strategy number 1, snuggle the livestock. This may be weird. Modern sensibilities recoil at the idea of bunking with a pig. But pigs are portable space heaters that oink in winter's cold, creaky, fire-smoked depths. And they don't charge rent. The cow sleeps in the room next to yours, though room is generous. It's more like a divider of old planks, a bit of straw, and the general understanding that if she kicks, you move. Her breath steams in the air like a dragon with social anxiety, and her body radiates the heat you thought only existed in stories about toasty inns and royal cloaks. Chickens roost on rafters, occasionally dropping gifts on the floorboards. A goat curls up by the door like an aggressive draft blocker. Even the family dog, who usually sleeps outside, slinks in around January with an expression that says, "Let's never talk about this again." This isn't just a quirky arrangement, it's survival. Body heat is currency. Every degree counts. You've wrapped yourself in layers until you resemble a laundry pile with opinions. But the collective warmth, people, animals, stew pots still radiating heat, keeps frostbite at bay. And yes, it smells. You've got wet wool, wood smoke, animal breath, and something deeply suspicious from the hay pile. You don't ask. You breathe through your mouth and remind yourself that smell is a small price to pay for circulation. There's a rhythm to winter nights. Now you all sleep in a pile. Siblings, cousins, livestock, like an over-ambitious medieval burrito. If someone needs to get up at night, it involves whispered apologies, accidental elbows, and at least one stepped-on tail. You share everything: space, blankets, warmth, occasionally dreams. Once your brother muttered, "Turn pie," in his sleep, and everyone sighed in unison. It was a good dream, a rare dream. You all went back to sleep hungrier, but a little happier. Historians still debate whether peasants honestly shared sleeping quarters with animals, or if that's an exaggeration. You'd invite them over for one night, just one, to experience the bliss of pressing your freezing toes against the warm flank of a very sleepy cow. Then they'd write the footnotes. In the morning, you wake up slightly flattened, but not frozen. That counts as success. The fire is mostly embers. The windows, well, the pig bladder stretched over the window hole are frosted with beautiful delicate patterns that you don't stop to admire because your breath just turned into ice mist and your foot stuck to the floor. You throw off the blanket, disturbing a cat, 2 chickens, and your sister's elbow. You stoke the fire, you start breakfast, you check on Bertha, who opens one eye, sigh deeply, and goes back to sleep like the boying queen she is. And maybe it's not glamorous, it may not be elegant, but it works. You're warm, you're alive. And despite the frost nibbling at the edges of the windows and the fact that someone drooled on your sleeve, you survived the night. Thanks, Bertha. Fire in winter is not just comfort, it's life. A flickering, crackling, occasionally smoke-belching miracle that stands between you and a slow transformation into a peasant-shaped icicle and keeping it alive. That's your new full-time job. Forget the fields, forget the animals. The challenge is convincing a bundle of damp twigs to become a blazing inferno. Welcome to fire banking, the ancient noble art of not letting the fire die. You don't have matches, you don't have lighters, you don't even have dry kindling most days. What you do have is a pile of semi-rotted wood, a piece of flint so small it should have retired last autumn, and the sheer determination of someone who refuses to freeze to death in their hut. Before bed, you prepare the hearth like it's a baby bird. You stack the coals. You arrange the ashes. You tuck it in lovingly with a blanket of embers, whispering sweet nothings like, "Please don't betray me." You cover it with a thick layer of ash to keep it insulated and smoldering. Then you go to sleep with fingers crossed and one eye open. Because if that fire goes out overnight, you're waking up to a room colder than a tax collector's handshake. And relighting it, that's not a quick fix. That's a 2-hour ritual of muttered curses, splintered knuckles, and breath-blowing usually reserved for romantic scenes in frosty meadows. You strike a flint, you coax sparks, you blow gently, you wave the fire like you're performing interpretive dance. And maybe you get a flame or it laughs in your face and dies again. Which is why most peasants didn't let it go out ever. Even when it was too warm, which let's face it, never. Even when it smoked so much, you started naming the wisps, even when it attracted every bug and soot demon in a 2m radius. Because without fire, the stew doesn't simmer, the bread doesn't bake, the wet socks don't dry, and the goat gets upidity when the room temperature drops below mildly miserable. The fuel situation grim, firewood is precious, you ration it like gold, you use everything. Twigs, dried dung, bark and sticks stolen from your neighbor's fence. Street, if it burns, it's fair game. At one point, you even burned an old chair after it lost its 4th leg. You held a small ceremony. The chair had served you well. When desperation strikes, you sometimes wander the forest's edge for dead branches. Not too far. You're not an idiot. The forest has eyes and wolves and bandits, and that one patch of moss that looks like it wants a fight. But you bring back what you can stack by the door and guard it like a dragon hoarding twigs. Fire maintenance becomes instinct. You check the coals first thing in the morning. You feed them midday. You top them off at night. You develop a 6th sense for when the fire is lying to you. Glowing red, but secretly dying inside. Relatable, historians still debate whether medieval peasants were skilled fire tenders or just constantly freezing. The answer is yes. You are skilled and you're still freezing. Because medieval fire doesn't spread warmth evenly. It creates one hot zone and leaves the rest of the house feeling like the inside of a snowman's sock. But it's yours, your hearth, your flame, your little patch of light in a mostly damp and dark world. And when you finally sit beside it, hands outstretched, toes thawing, stew bubbling faintly, you feel rich. Not gold rich, not castle rich, but warmth rich. And that's the kind of wealth that keeps your bones from turning into brittle frost sculptures. So you tend it, you feed it, you love it like a slightly dangerous pet. Because in this season, fire is family. And if it ever goes out, you start the dance again. Travel sounds romantic until you're doing it in the Middle Ages. No horses for you, no maps, no charming roadside inns with mulled cider and soft beds. Just mud, vague directions, and the realization that you might have made a terrible mistake somewhere between. Let's go visit Aunt Elsie, and why is that tree looking at me funny? Because here's the truth. Leaving your village is a genuinely bad idea. Not just because you might get lost, but because the entire world outside your hamlet is built like a giant medieval obstacle course with extra mud. Let's start with the roads. Roads is a generous term. You actually have tracks, 2 parallel grooves worn into the earth by ox carts and disappointment. In summer they're dust, in spring they're puddles. There are ice rinks in winter for people who can't afford boots. There are no signs, no distances. It's vague advice passed down from people who haven't left in decades. Go until you see the tree shaped like a man yawning. Then turn right at the stone that smells like vinegar. Sure, helpful. And then there's the forest. Oh, you thought that was scenery? No, friend. That's level 2 of the... You're definitely going to regret this quest. It's dark, it's dense, it's full of roots waiting to twist your ankle and creatures that don't blink. Wolves, yes. Boars, possibly. Mysterious figures and hoods might be monks or bandits, depending on how politely you say hello. And everything makes sounds at night that you try very hard to pretend are just the wind. Speaking of bandits, travel is their full-time job. You're walking along, minding your business, when suddenly, hello. A group of very enthusiastic strangers who would like to relieve you of your 1 silver penny, your cloak, and your last shred of optimism. And you're not armed. Your weapon is a stick you found by a ditch, and the sheer power of hoping no one notices how much your legs shake. Even if you avoid the wolves, robbers, and forest full of resentment, you still have not to get lost, which is harder than it sounds because medieval directions are based on landmarks that may no longer exist. Like the burned-out oak tree replaced by a shrub, or where the giant used to live. Super helpful. Thank you. There are no GPS coordinates, no signs. There are no friendly tavern keepers to offer a map and a pint. Just a lot of walking, second-guessing, and the slow creeping dread that you've passed the same weird stump 5 times already. And here's the kicker. Even if you make it to your destination, you're still unsafe. Other villages don't want strangers. You might speak the same language, but your accent is different. Your clothes are wrong. You hold your spoon funny. Suspicion follows you like a hungry cat. You watched, whispered about, and possibly asked if you were bringing disease or debt. Hospitality is not guaranteed. Food is scarce, beds are claimed, and you are just another traveler who may or may not be a wandering sorcerer, depending on how you respond to what opinion on St. Cuthbert's goals. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were truly rooted in the land by law or by the sheer risk of stepping off it. The reality is that most folks stayed close to home not because they lacked curiosity, but because curiosity tended to get you eaten, but people did travel sometimes. Messengers, monks, merchants, madmen. You might see them once a year, covered in dust and stories. They bring news of cities with stone walls, towers, and streets that aren't mud. They talk of markets where spices flow like water and people bathe for fun. It all sounds like fantasy, and for you it could be because the moment you imagine yourself in that world, your mind drags you back to your sheep, to your sister who needs help mending her boots, to the cabbage you were supposed to check on. Because out there might be danger, but here, muddy, smoky, predictable as a stew, here is home. So you stay, you tend the fire, you fetch water, you daydream of faraway places, and then shake your head and mutter, ah. Because the truth is, traveling might change your life, but only if it doesn't end at first. You hear the hoofbeats before you see him. Clump, clump, squelch, squelch, because even the Lord Steward can't avoid the relentless medieval mud. He rides a tired-looking horse, wears a cloak that's trying very hard to be intimidating, and carries a leather satchel full of doom. The ledger. And that can only mean one thing. Tax day. You stand a little straighter. You try to look poor, but not suspiciously poor. You subtly shove your slightly better loaf of bread behind a jug. You mentally rehearse the phrases, Had a bad harvest, lost a goat, and the turnips betrayed us. It's not lying exactly, it's narrative shaping. The steward dismounts with the enthusiasm of someone who once dreamed of being a knight and ended up in accounting. He greets no one. He nods at the village elder, sneezes once, and immediately begins the slow, painful process of inspecting everyone's life down to the last barley grain. He's not cruel, he's worse, efficient. He asks questions with the warmth of a damp stone. How many chickens? How much rye did you harvest? Is that fence new? You answer cautiously. He's too confident, and he assumes you're hiding something. He is too hesitant, and he believes the same. Your neighbor Tom once joked that the steward had two moods, pencil scratch and pencil snap. No one laughed, especially not Tom, who got taxed double for interrupting official documentation with Mant. You lead the steward into your home. He squints at your pile of firewood like it owes him an explanation. He notes your single cow and your suspiciously plump goose. He makes a noise when he sees your daughter's new tunic as though the fabric is a personal insult. Then comes the worst part. He writes things down slowly, carefully, with a smugness only wielded by people who own quills and never get their boots muddy. You know what comes next? Tallies, quotas, maybe even a small fine for that unauthorized cabbage patch. You pay in grain, in labor, in anything he deems valuable. Sometimes he accepts eggs. Sometimes he wants you to help repair a road for the good of the realm, which sounds noble until you're hauling rocks for 8 hours, and your reward is a shrug. And if you're behind, if the winter was hard, the rats were bold, and St. Mildred's goat cursed the harvest. He doesn't want excuses. He wants numbers. You might beg. You might offer what you can. He might say he understands, then double the tithe next month to compensate for your generous underperformance. Historians still debate whether the steward was seen as an enforcer of order or a villain in a dull story. You don't debate. You try not to flinch when he glances at your second sack of barley. The steward doesn't work for you. He works for the Lord, the actual landowner, the one who lives in a distant manor with genuine windows and maybe a bed that doesn't creak every time someone sneezes. You've never met him. You're not even sure he exists. But his steward, oh, he's real, and he's here. And heaven forbid you forget your taxes. There are punishments, not just fines, forced labor, confiscated animals, in extreme cases, eviction, being told to leave your land in a world where every other patch of land is owned by someone who'd rather tax you than take you in. So, you do your best. You give the steward what he asks. You nod politely. You pretend you're thrilled to hear that the king is considering another war, which might mean even more taxes. Temporarily, of course. Which might mean even more taxes. Temporarily, of course. When he finally leaves, the village exhales, not all at once. That would be suspicious. Just a slow trickle of relief, like water draining from a very leaky roof. You return to your chores. You hide the good bread again. You count your chickens twice just in case. And though you grumble and joke about him behind his back, quietly, very quietly, you know he'll be back. He always comes back. Rain or shine, plague or feast day, there will always be a man with a ledger and a horse that looks equally fed up. In this world, even your hard-earned money barely gets an intermediary. You've never met your lord. Not really. You've seen him once, maybe twice from a distance, atop a horse so polished it probably bathes more often than you do. He was draped in delicate fabrics, surrounded by men in armor and smiling like someone who'd never had to dig a ditch in January. But his presence, oh, it's everywhere. It's in the taxes, the steward, the rules carved on the church door. It's in the whispered stories around the hearth. Did you hear the Lord's dog got a velvet bed? He's building a second granary for his wine barrels. Apparently, his chickens wear tiny shoes. Okay, that last one might have been exaggerated. Still, the point stands. You live on his land. You work his fields. You owe him a portion of everything. Grain, eggs, sweat, and yes, even your time if he demands it. Because in the grand feudal pyramid, you're about 4 layers below the guy who mucks out his hunting hounds. And yet, the strange thing is there's no real villain in it. The Lord doesn't cackle or tie villagers to train tracks. Trains have not been invented yet. He doesn't even see you. You're not a person to him. You're a number, a yield, a percentage in someone else's parchment. His power is abstract but suffocating. Your cousin disappears into war if he says you must provide a man for his army. If he raises taxes, you will eat fewer onions this winter. If he decides to build a new hall, guess who's hauling stones? Not that you complain out loud, that would be unwise. Dissent in this world is not met with debate and open forums. It's met with the stocks, or worse, being noticed. Because that's the secret. The worst thing that can happen to a peasant is to get noticed by their lord. Attention means risk. Maybe he takes a liking to your land. Perhaps he decides your daughter would be a fine servant in his household. And we all know that. Maybe he thinks your fence looks too new. Better tax that enthusiasm, so you stay low. You stay muddy. You nod respectfully and say, "My lord," even when he's not around, in case the wind carries your voice to the wrong ears. Historians still argue whether the average peasant was loyal to their lord or simply too exhausted to resist. Based on your experience, the answer is yes. Loyalty, fear, habit. They blend like leftover pottage. You don't question the system because questioning the system is a luxury reserved for people with warm cloaks and personal guards. Besides, not all lords are monsters. Some do help during bad harvests. Some forgive debts. Some even throw feasts where the peasants get meat and one full mug of ale. Just don't look the Baron directly in the eyes. He doesn't like that, but kindness is rare. What you expect from your lord is distance, an elegant neglect. You want him rich enough to be distracted, powerful enough not to need anything from you personally, and far enough away that his horse has a chance to throw a shoe before reaching your front door. When news comes from the manor, new tithes, new rules, new demands, it's always delivered with that special kind of bureaucratic charm. Vague, overcomplicated, and coated in wax. Sometimes you think the messengers get paid per syllable. Yet you endure because what else can you do? You've got turnips to tend, stew to stir, and chickens to negotiate with. You're not going to overthrow the feudal system today. You want to get through the week with all your toes and maybe half a cheese. So you bow your head. You mutter "my lord" when appropriate. You make your fence look just broken enough to seem humble. And you hope deep in your peasant soul that your name never comes up in anyone's conversation at the manor. Because anonymity in your world isn't just safety, it's freedom. It's Sunday, which means two things. No ploughing and plenty of guilt. You wake up slightly later than usual because God in his mercy allows you 1 extra hour of sleep. Then you put on your best tunic, the one with the fewest patches. Brush the straw from your hair and prepare your soul for church. The chapel isn't grand. It's a lopsided stone building at the edge of the village with a crooked bell and a door that groans like it's remembering every sin that's ever passed through it. Inside it smells like smoke, beeswax and spiritual anxiety. The benches creak. The air is cold. The windows are just fancy holes. But it's where everyone goes. Not just because of faith, but because not going would be noticed. Skipping Mass isn't just a personal decision. It's an invitation for rumors. You sit with your family trying not to fall asleep during the Latin parts you don't understand. The priest speaks in the voice of someone who hasn't had a warm meal in a week and is holding it against the congregation. He tells stories from the Bible, offers warnings about the fires of hell, and occasionally slips in some solid farming advice. Sow not thine notes too early, lest frost smite thy hopes. Thanks, Father. You nod solemnly. Everyone nods solemnly. Even the baby looks mildly concerned. Then come the confessions, whispers of wrongdoing, loud enough to be heard by everyone in the front row. You hear about stolen eggs, impure thoughts, and that time someone probably cursed the barley crop. The priest nods, forgives, and reminds everyone that sin is like a poorly thatched roof. Ignore it, and it will leak. Afterwards, there's gossip. It's not official, but it's as holy as communion. You whisper about who wore what, who sneezed during the homily, and whether old Marjorie's miraculous healing from her goat bite was divine intervention or just vinegar and stubbornness. But faith isn't all fire and brimstone. There's comfort here too. Familiar hymns, quiet prayers, candles flickering like shy stars. You don't have much, but when you kneel with your neighbors, you're part of something older and larger than famine or taxes. You also fear it deeply. The church has rules, a lot of them. No working on holy days, no eating meat during Lent, no dancing unless it's solemn and contains no joy. The priest keeps a sharp eye out for sinners and possibly heretics. Anyone who asks too many questions. You try to behave. You pray before meals. You light a candle when the cow looks ill. You cross yourself whenever someone says hail storm or owls. It's a thing, but medieval religion isn't just rules. It's stories. Tales of saints who lived in caves, drank only dew, and tamed wolves with kindness. Miracles that feel suspiciously like lucky coincidences. Curses that sound a lot like don't touch that warnings with extra drama. Once a traveling friar told a story about a man who angered a saint and became a mushroom that stuck with you. There are relics too. Holy objects are locked in wooden boxes and displayed twice a year. The priest says one of them is a toenail from St. Cuthbert. You're not entirely convinced, but you nod along with reverence because no one wants to be the guy who doubts a saint's foot hygiene. And then there are the local superstitions. It is not an official doctrine, but everyone believes them. Don't walk under a ladder during Lent. Don't sweep after sunset. It invites demons. Don't touch the old well at night unless you want dreams of screaming sheep. No one remembers why these rules exist, but breaking them feels like tempting divine sarcasm. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were deeply religious or afraid of cosmic consequences. You lean toward both. Faith is comfort, but it's also a complex, exhausting checklist of things you must not do if you want your turnips to grow and your soul to avoid eternal weeping. Still, there's something beautiful about it. The rituals, the rhythm, the way bells mark time is better than any sundial. The way people cross themselves automatically when a child coughs. The way the chapel, drafty as it is, always feels like the center of your tiny, muddy universe. So you leave Mass blinking in the light, full of piety and potato-based gossip. You'll try to sin less this week. You'll probably fail. But that's all right. The priest's door is always open, and you've got a candle lit just in case. Because in a world ruled by weather lords and leaky roofs, sometimes the only thing keeping you upright is a whispered prayer and the faint hope that St. Cuthbert is watching over your cabbages. It's market day, that magical, chaotic, borderline overwhelming moment when your sleepy little village transforms into a bustling swirl of noise, smells, and accidental elbows. For a brief moment, everything feels connected. The whole world decided to converge on your muddy patch of nowhere, bearing turnips, chickens, gossip, and possibly fleas. You wake up early, heart pounding like it's Christmas morning, if Christmas came with haggling and goat droppings. You throw on your second best tunic, your best is still drying after last week's incident involving a tipped chamber pot, and grab your little bundle of goods, eggs, woven cords, and maybe a carved spoon if you're feeling entrepreneurial. Because today you're going to trade, you're going to barter, you're going to make deals, or at the very least try not to come home with fewer onions than you started. As you approach the village square, you hear it first. Shouting, laughing, bells, clucks, neighs, the unmistakable yelp of someone stepping on a rake. Then you see the stalls, wooden tables draped with cloth, baskets bursting with goods, and people, so many people from neighboring hamlets and traveling merchants who speak with suspiciously theatrical accents. It smells like fried dough, fresh herbs, smoke, sheep, and a hint of pickled disaster. It's glorious. You wander through the crowd like a duck in a thunderstorm, confused but determined. One stall offers iron nails, another sells ribbons that might once have been white. And one bold soul is peddling miracle cures made of garlic, vinegar, and what appears to be frog juice. You trade your eggs for a chunk of cheese that smells like sin and happiness. You swap your woven cord for a length of rough cloth. You attempt to trade your spoon, but the merchant already has 4 and claims they're cursed. And then there's the entertainment. A juggler drops apples. A musician with 3 strings and 1 eye plays something vaguely like a tune. A dancing bear, you're still not sure if that's legal, thumps along, followed by a small child collecting coins and offering enthusiastic roars. The local ale stand is swamped. Men are already red-cheeked and singing by midday. Someone's trying to flirt with the baker's daughter using only interpretive dance and a particularly enthusiastic leek. You make a mental note not to do that. But markets aren't just about buying and selling. They're where you learn things, real things. Who's sick? Who's betrothed? Who's running away with the cooper's apprentice? One merchant whispers that war is brewing in the south. Another swears he saw a monk sneeze gold. You nod intrigued and trade a turnip for details. You also see things you've never seen before. Salt from the coast, dried oranges that smell like sunshine, a pair of shoes so fine you're afraid to look directly at them. You don't buy anything, of course, but you touch. You wonder. You imagine. Historians still debate whether markets were vital community hubs or glorified pickpocket conventions. And to be fair, you did lose a coin purse once, but you also found a scarf and a friend, and possibly a love letter written on the back of a beet recipe. The church keeps a wary eye on the festivities. Too much cheer might lead to dancing, and you know how that goes. Dancing leads to joy, joy leads to sin, sin leads to more market stalls. But for now, joy wins. The afternoon sun casts long shadows over barrels of apples and sacks of grain. Children chase each other between carts. A rooster escapes and leads 3 men on a wild goose chase. Ironically, without a goose, someone proposes marriage next to the honey cakes. She says yes. The crowd cheers, then someone sneezes into a cabbage and it all gets awkward again. By the end of the day, your feet ache. Your satchel is heavier than you remember and your face hurts from smiling. You walk home slower, chewing on a roasted chestnut, watching as the stalls come down, the carts roll out, and the village exhales back into its regular rhythm. You didn't get rich. You didn't buy that miracle potion. But you were part of something bigger, louder, more colorful than your usual world of turnips and soggy socks. And for one bright, chaotic day, that was more than enough. You don't think of yourself as political. You don't have time to be political. You're too busy chasing chickens, fixing your fence with hope and a stick, and trying not to sneeze directly into your remaining grain bag. But like it or not, politics still happens to you. You might not vote, but you get taxed. You might not read the news, but the news rides in on horseback wearing a tabard and a smirk and declares something like, "The king is at war again," before riding off with your barley, because that's how you usually find out about significant events, through a sweaty herald shouting into the wind, or a traveling merchant who swears he heard it from a monk who heard it from a priest who wasn't drunk. This week's gossip. The king has raised the levy again. You're not sure why. Something about a border dispute or a crusade or a dragon that owes him money. Either way, it ends with you giving up your barley and him riding around in gold-trimmed underpants. And now there's talk of a draft. You hear it whispered after mass over pottage and during suspiciously long bathroom breaks at the market. Young men are being called to serve, not go to war in plate armor and return with songs written about them. You go in a borrowed tunic holding a stick and hope you don't sneeze near the wrong night. People are nervous. You can feel it in the air. Men practicing with wooden swords behind barns. Mothers weeping into onions. Old soldiers muttering about the last time. And staring into the middle distance like they can still smell the fire. You've never fought. You've never left. Your world is turnips and goats and a cow named Bertha. War feels distant like thunder in another village. But then the steward returns with a list, a parchment full of names. Yours is on it. Suddenly politics isn't abstract, it's personal. You're not going to war yet, but now you're responsible for something called contribution. You're to provide the Lord's levy with food, wool, or a weapon. Preferably a sword, possibly a sheep. You'd better have a convincing smile and some persuasive beans if you don't have either. So you offer what you can. A half-rusted axe head, a woven rope, and a sack of onions so aromatic it brings tears to the steward's eyes. He accepts, barely. You make a note to hide your better tools next time. You also hear rumblings about rebellions. Not here, of course. Never here, but elsewhere. Peasants arising, demanding less tax, fewer days of forced labor, and more bread that isn't made from bark. The kind of stories that make you sit up straighter and then immediately slouch back down, because who has the energy for rebellion when your roof's leaking and your goat just ate your shoe? Historians still debate how aware peasants were of the broader politics shaping their world, based on your reality. You're very aware. You don't have much say. You're a grain in the granary, a single tile in someone else's mosaic. And yet you adapt. You listen. You nod at the right moment. You avoid speaking too loudly in front of strangers because one day's gossip is another day's heresy. And no one wants to end up in stocks because they repeated a joke about the bishop's haircut. Still, you carry the weight of the kingdom on your back. Quite literally, when you're hauling wheat to the manor, your labor feeds the castle. Your wool warms the troops. Your silence keeps the peace. But sometimes, just sometimes, you let yourself imagine a world where you're holding the pen, writing the laws, choosing which turnips get taxed. A strange, radical thought. You shake your head and get back to work. Because for now, you're not the king. You're not the lord. You're not even the steward. You're the peasant who sharpens a rusty hoe, feeds the fire, and prays the war stays elsewhere. You didn't ask for drama. All you wanted was a quiet afternoon of mending your fence, arguing with your goat, and maybe stealing a nap if the chickens didn't start another riot. But no, today is a lawsuit day, and somehow you're involved. Now don't picture powdered wigs or marble carousers. This is not that kind of trial. This is village justice. A theatrical blend of folk tradition, thinly veiled shouting, and an alarming number of references to livestock. It starts when your neighbor, John with the eyes, accuses you of stealing his firewood. You didn't, probably. It isn't very easy. Firewood has no name tags. It all looks the same. And anyway, he once borrowed your ladder and never returned it. The village reeve gets involved. He's not a judge, per se, but he does own the only chair that doesn't wobble, which gives him a certain gravitas. He gathers everyone in the clearing near the chapel where most legal matters are handled. Why the clearing? Because it's neutral ground, and because the last time someone brought a sheep into the chapel, it ended badly. You're summoned. Not officially, of course, just loudly. A child yells, "You're wanted," and hands you a stick as a makeshift summons. You sigh, dust off your tunic, and prepare to defend your honor. Or at least your woodpile. Village justice is very public. Everyone attends, not because they care about truth and order, but because it's the best entertainment on this side of the solstice. They bring snacks. The old ones bring benches. The goats show up uninvited. The reeve begins. Who claims injury? John with the eyes steps forward, points dramatically and says, "He took my wood." Gasps. Chickens flutter. A pig sneezes. You respond, "It was on my side of the hedge." Murmurs. Someone nods. Someone else whispers. Classic defense. Then the character witnesses arrive. Marjorie, the elder, who once swore she saw a witch in her reflection, claims she saw you hauling logs suspiciously 2 days ago. You respond, "I always haul logs suspiciously." That is a fair point. The blacksmith's apprentice chimes in with an unsolicited poem. No one stops him. It includes the phrase timber betrayal. You consider crying and then trial by congregation. That's the system. You each gather a group of people willing to swear on your innocence. These are called oath helpers. You grab your brother, 2 cousins, and the village beekeeper who owes you a favor. They all solemnly swear you are too honest to steal, except for your cousin Ralph, who blinks and says mostly, "It's enough." The reeve leans back, chews thoughtfully on his pipe stem, and declares no fine. But next time, mark your wood. Justice delivered. Historians still argue whether medieval legal systems protected the common folk or maintained order through spectacle. You say your dignity now smells like a goat, and you're not speaking to John for at least a week. Still, you walk away free. Ish. There's no jail, no formal punishment. But there is gossip. For the next month, you'll be the wood thief. Even the chickens give you a side eye. And this wasn't even a severe case. Serious crimes. Stealing livestock, arson, blasphemy. Go to the memorial court. That's where the Lord's bailiff presides with scrolls, scribes, and considerably more punishment, stocks, fines, public humiliation. In rare cases, even trial by ordeal. You've heard of a man forced to hold red-hot iron to prove his innocence. Spoiler, he did not. You avoid those courts like the plague, which is an excellent idea. But village-level disputes, they're messy, loud, mostly fair, and somehow involve at least 3 bystanders becoming romantically entangled by the end. It's like a soap opera written by people with dirty fingernails and a suspicious number of chickens. So now you go home victorious-ish. Your firewood remains yours. John mutters something about divine justice, but you pretend not to hear. You restack your pile, carve a little symbol on each log just to be petty, and reward yourself with a nap under the one corner of your roof that doesn't leak. Because in this village, justice is swift, public, and slightly ridiculous. And honestly, that feels just about right. Evening has fallen, the chickens are roosting, the hearth is glowing, and in your little peasant corner of the world, that means one thing. Story time. No books, no candles to waste on solo reading. As if you could read. People gathered close, sharing breath, sharing blankets, and passing down your village's strange, beautiful, and slightly suspicious oral history. One tale at a time. It begins with a cough, then a sigh. Then someone, usually the oldest person present, leans forward, squints at the fire like it owes them money, and says, "Did I ever tell you about the man who swallowed the moon?" Everyone leans in. You've heard the story before. You've all heard it before. But that doesn't matter because storytelling isn't about surprise. It's about rhythm, comfort, the warmth of the known, the joy of repetition, and the candlelight makes your uncle look mysteriously like a haunted carrot. The tales are wild. Some are about saints who spoke to animals. Others are about devils who disguise themselves as traveling cheese merchants. There are fairies, witches, wolves that talk, pigs that sing, and one deeply confusing fable about a carrot that marries a knife. You know they're not true. Probably, maybe. But in a world where wolves howl and fog rolls in too fast, and the priest occasionally blesses the well just in case, it's hard to be certain. And honestly, being certain would ruin the fun. You take your turn too. You tell the one about the boy who whistled at midnight and turned into a goose. Your brother tries to add a subplot about a haunted privy. Everyone objects, but not really. The children gasp, the dog farts, the fire pops dramatically as if on cue. This is the medieval version of Netflix. There are no buttons, no buffering, just a flickering log, a dry throat, and a 100-year-old plot that still gets laughs. Stories aren't just fun, they're important. They teach lessons. Don't stray from the path. Always be polite to talking animals. Never trust a man with eyebrows that meet. They're also how history survives. Your grandfather remembers a storm from 50 years ago as a battle between sky giants. You remember it as the night your roof gave up. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants believed or enjoyed the tales they told. It's likely both. Belief is flexible when it's cold, and the fire is cozy. And oh, the local legends. There's the cursed rock in the pasture that moos every midsummer. The haunted bread oven near the mill burns everything but oatcakes. And that mysterious glint in the forest. Everyone says it's a fairy coin, but no one's brave or foolish enough to check. You add your theories. You invent stories. Sometimes it's just to tease the kids. Sometimes because, well, they feel real. It's more real than the ache in your spine or the draft crawling under the door. Even the animals get pulled into the lore. One of your chickens is said to have pecked a ghost once. Another laid 3 eggs during a thunderstorm, meaning she's blessed, cursed, or both. She looks smug. She probably knows. But the best stories, the ones about your village. The flood lifted a pig onto the roof. The year the ale turned blue, the priest said it was a diva in punishment or mold. The time someone mistook a sack of flour for a ghost and screamed so loud they scared the baker into early retirement. These are the stories that live. They're passed from tongue to tongue like heirlooms, embellished, embroidered, occasionally set to song. No parchment could hold them. No scribe could capture how your uncle's nose crinkles during the punchline. Because stories are alive. They're your legacy, your entertainment, your resistance to the grinding sameness of peasant life. When your muscles ache, your belly growls, and tomorrow looks exactly like today. A good tale lifts you, if only for a moment, above the mud and into wonder. So you laugh, you gasp, you groan when your cousin tries to insert a romantic subplot again. And eventually the fire burns low. The room gets quiet. The storyteller's voice softens. A final sentence hangs in the air. And they say, "On foggy nights you can still hear the goat singing." You won't believe it. Not really, but you'll tell it again tomorrow. You might think of education as classrooms, books and quills. Maybe a stern teacher and the faint smell of chalk. But for you, education is a lifetime subscription to the school of hard knocks. And the tuition is paid in scraped knees, singed eyebrows, and the occasional goose bite. Let's be clear, you can't read. Not because you're unintelligent, but because no one ever taught you. Why would they? Books are expensive. Teachers even more so, and parchment is worth more than your entire wardrobe. Besides, your days are full of chores, mud, and surviving. So how do you learn? By watching, by doing. By falling off a ladder and realizing, ah yes, that rung was suspiciously creaky. Your mother teaches you how to mend clothing. Your father shows you how to sharpen a blade without cutting anything vital. Your neighbor grumbles about the best time to plant onions, and she knows because her onions always look smug. You learn through songs, catchy little rhymes that get stuck in your head like burrs. Sun on the right, sow when it's light. Or if the pig sleeps flat, the storm's where it's at. Folk wisdom wrapped in rhythm, half of it isn't true. You follow it anyway. There's no formal curriculum, just an endless stream of information disguised as gossip, superstition, or unsolicited advice. One day you're told not to dig too deep near the old well because that's where the goblins live. You believe it? Not because you fear goblins, but because you fear collapsing into a hole filled with questionable water and ghost eels. Children start working young. Tiny hands are great for collecting eggs, scaring birds, and fitting into places adults can't reach, like under the barn or inside barrels where things have gone suspiciously quiet. Learning happens through participation. You're not assigned homework. You live it. If you're lucky, the village priest knows how to read. He could teach a few letters to the children after Mass. Latin, mostly holy words. You repeat them without understanding. More magic spells than language. Once a traveling friar visited and read from an actual book. You remember being stunned. The parchment, ink, and words are so neat, clean, and powerful. He read a tale about a king who tamed a lion by singing. You were skeptical, but enchanted. That story lived in your head for weeks. Historians still argue whether literacy was rare or undervalued in peasant life. But you don't need arguments. You know that reading is for other people, for clerics, for scribes, for nobles whose fingers have never touched cow dung. You do keep records of a kind. Scratched tally marks on the barn wall. Symbols on sacks to mark what's inside. A knot in a cord to remind you when to turn the compost. It's not elegant, but it works. And memory. Memory is king. You remember songs, recipes. Which herbs help with headaches? Which ones help you sleep? You remember who owed you eggs and who returned your spade broken and claimed it was like that already. You carry years of information in your head because there's nowhere else to put it. And when someone dies, a grandmother, an elder, a neighbor who always knew when the frost would come, it's not just a person lost, it's a library burned. You mourn their stories, their skills, their perfectly timed warnings about bad cheese. But you do your part to pass it on. You show the younger ones how to patch a roof, how to spot sickly barley. How can you trick a goat into cooperation with nothing but confidence and a cabbage leaf? Because your education never ends. It doesn't graduate. It doesn't come with a scroll or a ceremony. But it's real. It's deep. And it's written not in ink, but in calluses, laughter, and how you know when to plant and when to rest. And maybe someday, years from now, a child will tug your sleeve and ask, "Why do we stack firewood like that?" And you'll answer with a smile in a story about when your house almost burned down because you didn't. You'll teach them too. Sickness doesn't knock in your world. It barges in, wipes its muddy boots on your rug, and settles in the best seat by the fire. And medieval peasant medicine? Well, let's say it's not exactly cutting-edge science. If you feel a tickle in your throat, that's your cue to panic just a little. What starts as a cough can quickly become a fever and then delirium. And then you either recover or get added to the village's mental list of people we'll miss, but probably shouldn't hug anymore. And so begins your journey through medieval health care's confusing, occasionally terrifying, often hilarious world. Step 1. Herbs. Lots of herbs. Some helpful, some decorative, some are deeply suspicious. You've got chamomile for sleep, nettle for strength, garlic for everything, and a slimy green thing that the healer insists is blessed by Saint Wibli. The village healer is both a treasure and a mystery. She's part herbalist, part midwife, part therapist, and part terrifying grandmother who once yelled a fever out of a child. She gives you teas, puces, salves, and advice like, sleep with an onion under your pillow, or rub this root on your chest, but only during a waning moon. You obey because at this point, logic has left the building. Step 2. Rituals. Someone lights a candle, someone else mutters a prayer in Latin or a decent attempt at it. You're anointed with oil or ale or maybe goose fat. You're not sure anymore. The important part is that it's ritualized goose fat. If you're lucky, the priest visits. He sprinkles holy water, mutters solemnly, and recommends confession just in case. Comforting. You try not to read into the way he sighs when he leaves. Step 3. Bleeding. Ah, yes. The medieval go-to. You've got too much blood. That's why your nose is runny and your toes are numb. So they cut you just a little and let out the bad humor. You feel worse, but now you have a bandage. Progress. And if it's the plague, well, everything changes. You've seen it before. The swellings, the fear, the empty homes. When someone starts showing signs, they're quietly moved to the edge of the village. No one says quarantine, but that's what it is. A hut, a blanket, a bowl of water was left outside the door. And prayers. Lots of prayers. You remember when the plague came last, people left bread on doorsteps and ran away. The air smelled like burning herbs in silence. The church bell tolled far too often. And afterward, there are too many empty chairs around too many fires. Historians still debate whether peasants believed in humor or followed them because they had no other option. You know the truth. People cling to anything. Ritual, root, or rooster when they're scared. Yes, rooster. Once someone strapped a chicken to their armpit to draw out the illness. The chicken looked horrified. So did everyone else. And yet, despite it all, people do survive. The body is stubborn. The immune system doesn't read Latin, but it works over time. And sometimes people recover through care, luck, or just pure peasant stubbornness. When you do get better, when the cough eases, the fever breaks, and you can walk more than 5 steps without seeing stars, people cheer. You're brought a weak ale. You're hugged cautiously. The goat sniffs you like it's deciding whether to trust you again. And from then on, you're a bit of a legend. Remember when you nearly died from swamp lung? Ah, yes, you say with pride. And now I only wee in the mornings. You're not cured exactly, but you're back. And that's enough. Survival is a triumph in a world without hospitals, antibiotics, and even a basic understanding of germs. It's your badge of honor, your rite of passage, your reason to sleep in tomorrow. Just don't tell the healer. She'll probably make you drink another cup of that weird mushroom broth. Let's talk about your house, your glorious, humble, occasionally collapsing home sweet home. You might call it a cottage. A scholar might call it a waddle and do structure with thatched roofing. You call it just enough roof to keep most of the rain out on a good day. It's small. You've got a single room shared by your entire family, the family's stuff, and occasionally a confused chicken who forgot she lives outside. There are no walls dividing the space, no bedrooms, no privacy, just one open area where sleeping, cooking, arguing, and goat chasing all happen within arm's reach. The walls are made from wattle and daub, a fancy way of saying woven sticks held together with a delightful paste of mud, straw, and whatever the pig sneezed on last week. It works sort of. When it rains, the walls leak. When it's hot, the mud cracks. When it's cold, the entire house sighs in unison. And the floor, dirt. Honest, hard-working, unapologetic dirt. Maybe with some straw thrown on top. If it's a festive season, you sweep it sometimes, primarily out of habit and misplaced optimism. The roof is thatched. Layers of dried reeds or straw packed tightly to confuse the rain, but loosely enough to invite an entire insect kingdom. Wasps live there, beetles, mice occasionally. Once a bird laid eggs in the rafters, and your little brother named them after saints. Windows, you sweet summer turnip. There is no glass here, just open slits, maybe covered with greasecloth or a thin bit of animal bladder if you're feeling luxurious. These let in light, air, and every gust of cold wind that insists on visiting unannounced. There's a hearth in the middle, always smoking, always cooking, and always mildly threatening to set your cloak on fire if you lean in too close. It's where you cook. It's where you dry clothes. It's where you warm your hands and stare blankly when your cousin starts explaining his theory that the moon controls pig behavior. Up in the rafters, you store sacks of grain, herbs, and mysterious bundles. You've promised never to open. The ladder cacks every time you climb it. The ladder cacks every time you climb it, which is the house's way of reminding you that gravity is a choice. Your furniture is mostly homemade. A few stools, one large bench that doubles as a bed, a table that leans like it's eavesdropping, a chest for anything important, which at this point means a spoon, a wool tunic, and your last decent pair of socks. You sleep on straw or straw-like substances, on mats if you're lucky, with your siblings, with your parents, with the dog. Bertha the cow is nearby, breathing heavily like a tired accordion. The warmth helps, even if the snoring does not. There's an outhouse, or more likely, a designated patch of earth behind the garden, politely called the necessary. You go there with a torch, a prayer, and the knowledge that you might meet a hedgehog. Bathing happens in a tub sometimes, usually with reused water, and ideally before the goat drinks it. But more often, it's just a washcloth, a basin, and the hope that no one notices you haven't rinsed behind your ears in 3 weeks. Historians still debate whether peasant homes were truly miserable or merely modest. Truth is, it depends on the season, the weather, and whether or not your roof decides today's day. It becomes a roof no longer, but it's home. It smells like smoke, onions, and old wool. It cacks when the wind blows. It holds heat like a leaky teapot. And yet, you know every inch of it, every beam, every quirk. That loose floorboard by the hearth, you stub your toe on it twice a week. But secretly, you'd miss it if it ever behaved. Because while the Lord has his manor and the bishop has his stone halls, you have this, a thatched hut filled with noise, with laughter, with soot-streaked walls that echo with stories and snoring. And sometimes on a quiet night, when the fire is still glowing and the wind has finally stopped whispering through the cracks, you sit back on your straw bed, take a breath of smoky, chicken-ented air, and think, this place is enough. Let's take a moment to talk about the most underrated, underappreciated, and often completely misunderstood part of your medieval life. Fun. Yes, you heard that right. You mud-streaked, bone-weary, turnip-scented. You do have fun. Not every day, not even most days. But when it happens, the chores pause, the tools are put down, and no one is on fire. It's glorious. The fun doesn't arrive in the form of jugglers or jesters. Unless someone's uncle gets into the ale early, it comes in little bursts. Sudden laughter when your brother trips over a chicken, a stolen honey cake on market day. The joy of realizing your goat has for once stayed in the pen. But when there's a real break, a festival, a feast, or just an exceptionally forgiving Sunday, that's when the village lets loose. The best celebrations are tied to the seasons. Harvest time is the big one. You've worked yourself nearly to collapse. The crops are in, the barn is foolish, and you can eat something besides stewed anxiety for once. So what do? You party like it's $13.99. There's music, not orchestras, but fiddles, drums, bagpipes if someone's brave, and so many voices. You dance badly, enthusiastically. It's like your knees weren't threatening you an hour ago. You link arms, stomp in circles, and forget that your boots have holes. There's food, extra food, meat if you're lucky, fresh bread if the oven cooperated, cheese that hasn't turned into a science project. Someone roasts a pig, someone else brings cider. Even the stingiest villager suddenly has a pie to share. And oh, the games. Children race, teens wrestle, adults get weirdly competitive over who can balance a jug on their head the longest. There's a game where you try to hit a hanging sack blindfolded and another where you chase a greased pig. The pig usually wins. You cheer anyway. And let's not forget storytelling contests. Who can tell the most ridiculous tale? Who can make the Reeve snort ale out of his nose? Answer, Margery the Elder, every time her story about the haunted buttock is legendary. There are love songs, drinking songs, work songs are reworked into jokes. You sing even if you're off-key, especially if you're off-key. Because at this moment, the melody is optional, but joy is mandatory. Sometimes there's a play, a little drama by villagers in hastily stitched costumes and wildly improvised props. You once played a tree, you nailed it. There are also more questionable traditions, like the annual race while holding an eel, or the hoe can hold their breath in the good bucket competition, or the secret midnight cheese rolling. D. Don't ask. I. It's tradition. Historians still argue whether peasants had leisure time or if every waking moment was toil. You say that you make time, you find moments. Otherwise, life would be nothing but smoke, taxes and soup, which looks disappointing. Even your holidays are clever. You take religious feast days and run with them. Saints' Day, parade, Candlemas, light everything you can get your hands on. Solstice, big fire, possibly some dancing around it, some me. Of course, the church keeps an eye on all this revelry. Too much fun leads to sin, too much sin leads to penance. So you pace yourself. Maybe sort of. Not really. And when it is all over, when the music fades, the cider runs out, and you are lying in a heap of straw and contentment, you remember why it matters. Not just for laughter, not just for the bread and the eel chasing, but because fun reminds you you live. That beyond toil and cold and taxes and goats that refuse to respect fences, there's joy. Real, honest, belly-aching, off-key singing joy. So you sleep with a smile. You dream of dancing pigs and haunted churns and how Margery winked at the steward after beating him in the sack race. And in the morning, you'll go back to work, but with a full belly, a happy heart, and maybe a mild hangover. It's the middle of the night and you're wide awake. Why? Not because you're anxious, not because you're busy, but because this is just how it works. In the medieval world, sleep happens twice. That's right. Your ancestors were twice-a-night sleepers. You've got your first sleep, which kicks off not long after sunset, and your second sleep, which starts a few hours after you randomly wake up in the middle of the night with a sense of calm bewilderment and an intense craving for pottage. Between these two sleeps is the magic hour or hours. You sit up, you poke the fire, you chat with whoever else is awake, which is usually everyone. Sometimes someone crochets. Sometimes someone prays. Occasionally, someone sneaks off to visit a sweetheart behind the barley shed. You know who you are. No one questions it. No one panics. The night is supposed to have a break in the middle. It's like your brain needs halftime. You listen to the wind. You scratch your leg. You stare at the rafters and try to remember if you fed the chickens. You didn't. You go outside to pee and make awkward eye contact with the neighbor doing the same thing. You both nod. Night solidarity, and then eventually you lie back down. You pull the itchy blanket over your head. You press your cold feet against someone else's warm leg. They grunt, pretend it wasn't you, and you drift back into the second, softer, dreamier sleep. But here's the thing, sleep isn't guaranteed. Not with your house. The dog barks, the fire sputters, the baby cries, a rat skitters across the roof like it's training for a rodent Olympics. You sigh, you roll over, you contemplate whether it's worth getting up to poke the coals, or if you can survive until sunrise by sheer stubbornness and foot friction. And even if the house is quiet, your body might not be. You're sore, your knees cack. You've got mystery bruises from yesterday's chores. Your shoulder hurts from carrying water. Your back hurts from carrying the entire emotional burden of knowing you must shovel manure again tomorrow. Still, you try to sleep because dawn comes early. And when it does, the whole world expects you to function. The rooster crows again and again and again. The rooster has no sense of timing. You suspect he just enjoys yelling. The rest of the house begins to stir. You hear someone yawn. Someone coughs. Someone makes a "why is the dog in my bed?" Noise. You stretch. You groan. You feel like you've been hit with a very polite cart. And then you rise slowly, stiffly, like a loaf of bread made from old oats and regret. You kick on your boots. You pat the cow. You re-stoke the fire with kindling that's somehow wetter than yesterday. You ladle out cold pottage and pretend it tastes better the third day. And yet you move. You live because that's what medieval peasants do. Historians still debate whether this biphasic sleep was common across all regions or just a charming quirk of pre-industrial Europe. You don't debate. You yawn, scratch your neck, and mutter about the moon being too loud again. And maybe, just maybe, you like it this way because the night isn't something to escape. It's part of your rhythm. Time stretches, thoughts wander, the world is quiet, soft and strange. You get your best ideas during that weird middle-of-the-night window, like putting honey in a stew or inventing goat mittens. Still a work in progress. And if sleep doesn't come, you still have the fire. You still have the stars through the smoke hole. You still have the sound of someone else breathing beside you. So you close your eyes. You try again because second sleep is calling. Some days blur together, but today is different. Today, a messenger arrived, and not the usual kind. Mud-caked, hungry, carrying a sack of increasingly suspicious potatoes. This one wore livery. I had boots that matched, a feather in his hat, and most suspiciously of all, he looked clean. He arrived with a flourish, handed the village reeve a scroll sealed in wax, and declared, "By royal command," before sneezing dramatically and promptly tripping over a goat. The scroll, an official decree from the king, or maybe the duke, or possibly the earl of wherever. It doesn't matter. It's written in looping Latin and smells faintly of anxiety. Word spreads like wildfire. You don't understand everything, but the gist is clear. Something big is happening. A tax, a levy, a census, a call to arms. It could be a particularly aggressive suggestion that everyone send more wool to the capital. The village reacts with its usual flair for measured panic. Some people are excited. "This is history," shouts old Bernard, who once mistook a passing monk for a wizard. Others groan. "It's always something," mutters your uncle, who hasn't smiled since the great cabbage shortage of 2024. For you, it means one thing: change. And change is scary because life here is predictable. You wake, you work, you eat, you sleep, you argue with the chickens, and then you do it all again. It's not glamorous, but it's yours. When someone from outside shows up, they bring more than news. They bring possibilities, and that's unsettling. Still, you gather in the square. The reeve reads the scroll aloud. It's long, it's formal. It uses words like herewith and aforementioned, which no one fully understands, but everyone nods solemnly. Then come the orders. You're to keep better records, count livestock. I suggest supplying wool or workforce or grain, or all three, depending on how ambitious the crown feels this week. You watch as names are written down. People react with quiet dread or theatrical sighs. One man volunteers for the census to impress the baker's daughter. Bold move. You're not on any special list, but you feel it. That tug of something distant, loud and official. The realization that the little world you know is part of a much bigger machine. One that occasionally turns its gaze toward you and says, "Yes, you. Let's make things interesting." Historians still argue whether medieval peasants felt connected to the kingdom or endured its consequences. You feel connected only when scrolls appear, demanding things and offering nothing but a waxy aftertaste. After the messenger leaves, face smug, cloak dramatically flapping in the wind like he's starring in a play. You all return to your chores. Life resumes, but with a new layer of buzz. Everyone talks about what it means. What might happen next? You sit by the fire that night and wonder, will there be more messengers? Will someone be taken to serve? Will the taxes rise? Will the reeve suddenly start using herewith in casual conversation? Probably. But you also know this. Your roof still leaks. Your goat still escapes. Your cottage still tastes like potato-adjacent cardboard. Whatever change comes, you'll face it the way you face everything else. One muddy step at a time. Because peasant life doesn't pause for politics. You still need to fix the fence, fetch water, teach your cousin how not to chase bees. The kingdom may rumble, but the village remains. And honestly, you prefer it that way. You wake to shouting, not the usual kind. Your brother accusing the goat of treason, or your neighbor singing aggressively about turnips. This shouting is urgent, alarmed. The type of shout that makes you sit up so fast, you get a straw in your mouth. Something's burning. You rush outside barefoot, shirt half tucked, holding a bucket you're not entirely sure is clean. Smoke billows over the rooftops. The thatch of old Edwin's cottage has caught fire, and like most things in your village, it's spreading faster than gossip on market day. And just like that, you're thrown into one of the great unspoken truths of medieval life. Everything is highly flammable. Your roof thatched, your walls mud and wood, your floors dirt, yes, but the dry dirt that dreams of becoming ash. Even your clothes could catch if you look at the heart too hard. Fires start from the most minor things. A stray coal, a cooking mishap, a candle forgotten, or in this case, Edwin's attempt to invent faster porridge using twice as much firewood and absolutely no supervision. There's no fire department, no sirens, no brave professionals and helmets, just villagers with buckets, blankets, and pure adrenaline. You form a line, pass water, shout instructions. Mostly incorrect ones, but you're trying. Someone throws a blanket over the flames. Someone else yells at the blanket. The pig runs by with what looks suspiciously like a roasting pan. Chaos reigns. Eventually, miraculously, you contain it. The roof is gone. The stew is ruined, but the walls are still standing. Edwin is shaken, slightly singed, and very apologetic. He offers to share his now slightly smoked turnips. No one accepts. You spend the rest of the day checking your cottage, patching holes, sealing the hearth, hiding all flammable recipes from Edwin. Because you know fire is always watching. It's not just an accident, it's a threat. A reminder that everything you own, everything you are, could vanish in a puff of smoke and a single bad decision. No insurance, no rebuilding fund. I suit and sigh, which is why fire safety has become second nature. You bank the coals carefully. You build the hearth wall higher. You shout at children who run with torches like they're playing some cursed relay race. You learn to read smoke like a weather omen. Too thick, bad. Too thin, suspicious, right? It means someone remembered to add dry wood for once, and if a fire does take your home, you rebuild. The village helps slowly. One log, one branch, one handful of daub at a time. Because while fire is cruel, the community is stubborn. Historians still debate how often peasant villages burned down and how they recovered. You don't need to discuss. You remember you've helped rebuild 3 roofs, 1 barn, and a very emotionally damaged chicken coop. Even celebrations can be risky. Feasts involve bonfires. Midsummer involves multiple bonfires. And there's always that one guy who thinks it's a good idea to dance with a torch. It's never a good idea, especially not while singing. But you keep fire anyway. You need it to cook, to survive the winter, to see after sunset. So you treat it with reverence and suspicion, like an old friend who occasionally flips tables. Tonight, after the excitement, the village is quiet. The stars peek through a hole in Edwin's new non-existent ceiling. People murmur, comfort him, and offer spare blankets. You bring him your least lumpy loaf as a peace offering. And when you finally lie down, you do so with one eye on the hearth. Because in this world, danger doesn't always wear armor. Sometimes it comes in a tiny spark and a puff of overconfidence. and sometimes it smells like burnt turnips. The seasons are changing again. You can feel it in your knees, nose, and pig's attitude. The leaves have turned the color of old mustard. The mornings arrive with fog thick enough to chew, and every breath carries that distinct scent of, winter's coming, which means it's preservation time. Now begins the great peasant ritual of turning everything edible into something that won't kill you 6 weeks from now. Because winter is cruel, winter is sneaky. Winter looks at your pantry and says, "Is that all you brought to the apocalypse?" So you preserve, ferment, dry, salt, smoke, jar, bury, hide, pray. I hope the one pickle barrel you left open doesn't become a science project by December. First up, root vegetables. You harvest them in bulk. Turnips, beets, carrots, parsnips the size of small children, and pack them carefully in the cool, dark part of the house, or the cellar, or if you're fancy, a pit in the ground covered with straw, prayers, and a big "do not eat yet" sign. Grain stored in sacks, tied up with hope and mouse deterrents. You put the better grain aside for flour, the slightly suspect grain aside for beer, and the very questionable grain aside for negotiation with the neighbor who still owes you eggs. Fruit. If you're lucky enough to have fruit, dry it over the hearth until it resembles tiny wrinkled secrets. Apples become chewy little memories. Plums have become something that might have once been edible. You pretend they still taste sweet. And meat. That's where things get dramatic. Not everyone gets meat, but if you've got a pig that's reached its final bacony destiny, the entire village becomes a scene from a medieval cooking montage. Butchering, salting, hanging, smudging herbs, arguing about proper smoke direction. You hang the meat above the hearth or in a smokehouse if you've got one. You guard it with your life, especially after the great sausage heist 3 winters ago. You never caught the thief, but you still suspect Marjorie. Even herbs get preserved. Dried bunches of sage, rosemary, and mint hang from the rafters like garlands of slightly crispy ambition. You use them for cooking, healing, warding off illness, and occasionally pretending you have a sophisticated palate. You also make stockpiles of firewood, dried dung, and peat. Because eating is lovely, but staying warm is necessary. You count every log like it's a coin. You debate whether you can stretch the dung supply just 1 more week without causing a full-blown domestic rebellion. Preserving isn't glamorous. It's not even always successful. Sometimes the pickles spoil. Sometimes the rats get into the barley. Sometimes the smoked fish develops a smell that causes the priest to schedule an emergency blessing. But you try. You always try because winter doesn't negotiate. Historians still argue whether peasants faced regular starvation or just seasonal shortages. The truth is, it was a little of both. Some years you scrape by, others you go to bed with an empty stomach and dream of boiled air. One year you ate boiled bark. It was crunchy. So now you prepare like your life depends on it, because it does. Every jar filled, every slab salted, every bean strung on a line is a promise. I will survive February, even the children help. They shell peas, scrub roots, and invent catchy songs like "Don't touch the dry fish or you'll regret it." The dog guards the pantry. The cat guards nothing but looks deeply judgmental about your carrot stacking. And when you finally finish, when the shelves are full, the barrels are sealed, the meats are hung, and the smokehouse smells like ambition and pork, you stand back and admire it all. Your kingdom, your fortress, your culinary apocalypse bunker. You know it might not be enough, that something always goes wrong. That Bertha the cow might eat half a bushel of apples and then look surprised. But for now, for this moment, you feel ready. Let the frost come. Let the nights stretch long and the wind howling through the cracks. You've salted your courage, pickled your hope, and tucked your survival neatly into jars. And you've got a backup plan too. It's called visit the neighbor and pretend you brought these turnips as a friendly gift, not a trade proposal disguised as friendship. Hey, you've done worse. Midwinter has arrived with all the subtlety of a goat in your bed. The sky hangs low like a ceiling made of dirty wool. The earth is frozen, the air bites, and your breath curls like tiny ghosts whispering. Why didn't we move somewhere warmer? This is the season of endurance. The days are short, the nights are long, time seems to slow down. and it looks like even the sun isn't sure it wants to be awake. You've eaten your best bread, the pickled vegetables have lost their charm, and you've now had turnip stew for 14 days straight, with only a fleeting day of radish relief. But it's not just about food. It's about getting through. You sleep more, you talk less. You layer up until you look like a walking haystack. You gather by the fire and watch it like it owes you an explanation for existing. The smoke clings to your clothes, your hair, your soul. You don't care. The fire is warm, everyone hibernates in their way. The older folks tell longer stories. The kids get louder because they can't run around outside. The goat seems to have decided that inside is where she lives now. She's not wrong, she's just rude about it. Even your chores shift. No more planting, harvesting or hauling. Just maintaining, fixing, surviving. You mend your shoes with twine and quiet desperation. You patch the roof for the 5th time this month. You try not to cry when the bucket freezes inside the house, and yet somehow there's beauty here. The snow blankets everything. The fields, once muddy and brown, now look clean. Software, even noble. Icicles hang like daggers from the eaves, catching the faint light and making your HVL look suspiciously like a gingerbread cottage. Minus the candy, warmth and general joy. You take small walks when the sun's out to see if it still exists. The world is quiet, the trees are bare. The path to the well is frozen solid, making it easier and more dangerous. You slip, you curse, you pretend no one saw. You share everything. Blankets, mittens, gossip. You play games made up on the spot. Guess that smell is surprisingly competitive. Staring contest with the cat is a recurring tie. You dream more in winter, not just because you sleep longer, but because you need dreams. Dreams of warmth, spring and meals with more than 2 ingredients. You dream of sunlight on your back and grass between your toes and never seeing another turnip again. Historians still argue whether mid-inter was a time of rest or quiet desperation for medieval peasants. You say that it's both. You rest because you have no choice. You despair because you have time to think. And yet, under it all, you survive. And then comes solstice, the longest night, the deepest cold, and somehow a reason to celebrate. There's a fire. Of course, there's a fire, a big one. You gather with your neighbors wrapped in cloaks and hope. Someone brings ale. Someone brings a song. Someone brings an inexplicable number of radish carvings. You pretend they're festive. You sing off key, joyfully, loudly. You tell stories, new and old ones, that make no sense, but are warmly received anyway. A child recites a poem about a chicken who saves Christmas. The chicken is present and unimpressed, and for a moment, just one, you don't feel cold. You feel human. Not just a peasant, not just a number on a tax scroll, but a person laughing, living, holding a mug of lukewarm cider and thinking, you know what? We're still here. And when you go home, cheeks pink from fire and mirth, you tuck in with a little more courage, a bit of warmth, because spring may be far away, but it's not gone, and neither are you. And then comes the thaw. It starts slowly, a drip, then another, then a strange, unfamiliar sound. Water moving, snow melts in hesitant streams down the sides of roofs. Icicles shrink, the air smells less like smoke and wet wool and more like a possibility. You step outside and the mud immediately tries to eat your boots. You've missed this. Not the mud per se, but the feeling of movement, of seasons shifting, of life crawling back, half asleep and squinting at the sun like it forgot it owed you a visit. Winter isn't over, not fully, but it's loosening its grip. You can stretch your limbs without hearing something snap. You can walk to the well without fearing an ice-induced public embarrassment. Birds start chirping again, loud and unapologetic, as if to say, where were you when we needed entertainment, and with the thaw comes work? Yes, again, always. You clean the cottage, not because you like cleaning, but because things have grown during the winter, and not all of them were invited. The pantry smells faintly of ghost onions. A bucket you forgot in the corner is now sentient. The goat's taken ownership of the best sleeping spot. She refuses to negotiate. Outside, fences need fixing. Tools need oiling. Fields need staring at with squinty eyes and a furrowed brow until they feel judged enough to start growing again. You gather your strength, seeds, hope, and if possible some help from anyone not currently pretending to have mysterious back problems. The village stirs. People start wandering out of their homes with expressions that say, "Did I dream winter? Or did my socks freeze solid?" At one point, everyone's a little paler, thinner, and more grateful for warmth and daylight. You prepare the soil, you kneel, you dig. Your fingers still stiff, find rhythm again. You plant more than you need because who knows what the year will bring. Drought, flood, pests, divine judgment, any of the classics, but still you plant. And somehow this season, this moment is the most hopeful of all. Not because anything is specific, but because nothing is. And that means anything is possible. Historians still debate whether peasants felt any real sense of renewal with the seasons, or whether it was just the cycle of toil repeating. You can't speak for all peasants, but you look at the thawing earth, the sun breaking through grey clouds, the little shoots of green poking up where frost used to rule, and you feel something stir inside you that's not just hunger. It's resilience, it's memory. It's you surviving another year. You've weathered famine, fire, fevers, frost. You've shared warmth, meals, stories, and silence. You've learned that even in the darkest season, there's a kind of light. And now, with muddy boots and a hopeful sigh, you begin again. Because you're not just a medieval peasant. You're a miracle with blisters. And now, as the fields breathe again and the frost becomes a memory instead of a menace, you sit at the edge of your little world, watching the last wisps of winter melt into the soil. The fire crackles low beside you, not fierce anymore, just warm enough to hum a quiet lullaby. The goat snores softly in the corner. The cottage is still. You did it. You made it through sickness and storms, hunger and harsh words, aching backs and long nights. Through plague and prayer and pickled vegetables that should never have been pickled. And somehow, even with the odds stacked like damp firewood, you're still here. Not triumphant, not glamorous, but whole. The rhythm of life carries on, soft and slow. A step, a breath, a pause. The pace that doesn't ask much, only that you keep going. That you listen for the thaw, that you laugh when the stew burns, even if it's the third time this week. You take joy where you can find it. In birdsong, clean socks, and the stubborn warmth of a sunbeam on a cold morning. You are not forgotten by time. You are its heartbeat, so let yourself rest now. Let your shoulders unclench. Let the stories settle like dust on the hearth. Let the night fold around you gently like a familiar quilt. You've heard the wind howl. You've seen the dark, and still your spirit flickers like a candle in a window. Steady, soft, and unextinguished. Now sleep well. See you in the next stories.